Manhood. Every day we navigate through the labyrinth of manhood, unable to locate a map or borrow one from the fathers who are still piecing together their own. We stumble through the same way they stumbled before us, sometimes walking into walls, mistaking them for pathways, sometimes walking down dead-end pathways, mistaking them for a way out. Through the frustration and confusion, we learn which turns we must make and which ones we must avoid. With every misstep and setback, we understand more that manhood is learning from the mistakes of the past in order to move into the future. Without fully understanding the assignment, we learn how to become men by instructing ourselves. We learn from our individual mistakes and took notes from each other's. Unqualified and unexperienced, we put together faulty lesson plans and fumbled through flawed curriculums, thinking that when we became adults, we would have it all figured out, as if getting older is an automatic rite of passage, a certification signifying achievement and successful completion of boyhood. We learned how to become men. Through the guidance of each other and observing ways, we eventually came up with a plan to get it right. That was Manhood. That's featured in my new book, Pain is Not Our Only Paintbrush, available on my website, thebrownsugarcafe.blog. Also available on Amazon. Please get it from me, not Amazon. But if you must, it's available on Amazon too. Black Out Loud Media Group. Welcome back to another episode of the Brown Sugar Cafe podcast, the place where poetry meets conversation. I'm your host, Terrence P. Elmore, and before we get into today's topic, make sure you hit that plus sign so you don't miss an episode. Also, please subscribe to my blog, thebrownsugarcafe.blog, and if you find any value in this episode or any other episodes, make sure you leave a heartfelt review. So with that being said, let's get to it. Welcome back to another episode. Thank you all who've been listening and giving feedback on the season so far. Had a lot of guests. It's been a while since I've done a solo episode, so thought I'd go ahead and do a solo episode. So today we're going to get right into the topic. Today we're going to talk about advice. Now, whenever getting advice from anyone, we need to vet that advice. We need to do our own research and make sure that advice actually benefits us and our goals, that the advice actually help us get closer to where we're trying to go. And there were two things that really stuck out to me last month. I was seeing when it came to advice about leadership. I always see this thing going around about leadership saying that if you're not willing to follow, then you're not fit to lead, which is a true statement for the most part. But sometimes people use this to actually, let's just call it what it is, to control people, to get people to follow them and to get them to pour into their vision while neglecting their own. That's one thing that's heavy when it comes to supporting someone's vision. When you're supporting somebody else's vision, it should never, ever have you neglect your own. And please beware of anyone that allows you to neglect your vision, anyone who never supports your vision in return, anyone who wants you to choose their vision over your priorities. That's a big one. You have to have boundaries when you're supporting somebody's vision. And one of the boundaries, the most important boundaries, is, does supporting someone's vision actually exceed your priorities? And is that person recognizing that? And if they aren't, are you recognizing that? You should always look at your boundaries whenever you're supporting someone. That is major, because you lose yourself supporting somebody else's vision. And we're not meant to support everyone's vision. Sometimes people's visions don't allow with our own, and that's fine. But if you're in the capacity to let somebody know, and I'm not just speaking with people who are the closest to you, it's different communities, different job organizations. You can use this for your employment. You can use this for your daily life. But if there's a vision that doesn't align with your values and your priorities, you need to reassess if you should be supporting that vision, because at the end of the day, your name is a part of it too. Your legacy is a part of it too. Whatever happens, you're going to be tied to it. So, and also, if somebody has you supporting their vision and they keep telling you that if you just wait, your time is coming, be very, very mindful of that. I've noticed over the years that that's one thing that's being used when someone's trying to get somebody to follow them, or someone's supposedly getting support for people for their vision. They use them, and their excuse for using them is, your time is coming. How long do I have to wait for my time to come is what you should be asking yourself. If your time is coming has been the phrase that has been told to you month after month, year after year, and now decade after decade, you need to reassess that relationship, because that's what partnering with somebody to support their vision should be. A relationship. It should be mutual. There should be some sort of mutual benefit when you're supporting someone else's vision. Don't let anybody demonize you into saying that, you're only doing something for looking for something in return. Well, if I'm investing my time and also money, I do need something in return, because I am a priority. My well-being is a priority, and supporting your vision is cool, but I don't want to be left out in the cold and putting my vision and what I should be doing to the side. Sometimes people can be taken advantage of because your visions do align, and they see that you're the person that can get things going where they need to be. And so they leech off of you. And at the end of the day, you've poured out everything, your heart, your efforts, your time, sometimes your money, and then you're left in the cold while they're thriving. And there's no reciprocation, there's no give back, or sometimes there's not even any acknowledgement. So be very mindful of that. When you hear that phrase, if you aren't willing to follow, you aren't willing to lead, because that's not always true. For the most part, it's used by people who want to take advantage of you. And then realize you have to do an assessment or vet the people that you're following. How do they treat people when nobody's looking? Does that align with your values? That's important, because a lot of people, we see their success, we see what they're doing in the community, we're seeing what they're doing in their lane, and they're horrible people behind the scenes. And their success is built off of taking advantage of people. Their success is built off of misleading people. Their success is built off of mistreating people. Are these the people you want to align yourself with? Are these the people you want to follow? Ask yourself that. And then when it comes to following people, what's the deadline on this? Following you and supporting your vision, what's the deadline before we get to me and my vision? What's the deadline before we get to me and my purpose? Are you steering me away from my purpose just to benefit you and your vision? Or does your vision have holes in it? Is it a flawed vision? Are you allowing me to interject to help you with the vision? That's another important piece. Following somebody doesn't mean that you have to be quiet and you don't have any say so and you're not helping them. And I don't mean help by, what I talked about earlier as far as them taking advantage of you. But if your ideas and your suggestions are welcomed and they're mutually beneficial, then you're a part of the vision. You're not just being used to carry out somebody's vision. That's major too. Do not allow somebody to use you to carry out their vision and you're not a part of the vision. So this whole, if you're not willing to follow, well, who am I following? What do they stand for? What do they align themselves with? What am I aligning myself with if I'm following them? Is this the person I should be following outside of success? Does it align with what's going on in their lives? Are they actually miserable behind the scenes? What does the behind the scenes look like? If you're supporting a vision that looks all polished and pretty to everybody else, but you see behind the scenes some flaws, don't be tricked into believing that. And this is another thing I hate when people say, it's like, well, nobody's perfect. That's true, but what are you doing to correct your mistakes? What are you doing to correct your flaws? Don't just use nobody's perfect as an excuse to be mediocre or as an excuse not to improve. So be mindful of people who do that as well. If you're calling out some things they're doing and to benefit them and to help them get to where they're going. And their response is nobody's perfect or everybody doesn't have it all together. Cool. But what are we doing to get ourselves to where we have it together? Or at least we're aligning with what people assume about us. And are we admitting when we're wrong? Those are some things you need to look at before you just blindly follow people, because you see the success they have and you see the money they have, you see whatever. So be careful of that. And that kind of brings me into my next thought. It's another phrase that I see, and there was something on Facebook that brought this up again about pricing. People love to say that your price isn't too high. The people just aren't your customer or your target audience. That is not true in every case. We need to be honest with people when it comes to pricing. I know, and I'm an advocate of people realizing their value, people understanding their value. But if you are just telling them that their price isn't too high and you haven't even looked at the service they're providing, you haven't even purchased something that they're giving or even seen something they're giving. Sometimes people give blind advice, especially on social media, about your price not being too high. They're just not your right audience. But we can't give this advice to everybody. Some people's service and the products they're putting out does not match the price that they're charging people. There was an event last year. I think it was last year. There was an event last year, and it was a event for Black businesses. But in retrospect, looking at the event and the pricing that you're charging the vendors, the pricing for people to come into the space, and the activities that took place, everything was overpriced. Everything was overpriced. There was like a $65 ticket for the people to come into a space where they're vendors. And this is in South Carolina. That doesn't make any sense. When you're setting the price for things, you have to look at your demographic and the people who might be coming to these things. And looking at the event in retrospect, it had a lot of things in it, like some performances. They had food, liquor, and a hookah spot. And in all actuality, it was a day party. If you really look at it, it was a day party. And from my understanding, this wasn't the first year. There was some leveling up to what took place from the first year to the second year. And I understand that with certain events and certain things that we're doing, our prices do increase, but have it make sense. The likelihood of somebody coming into an event with an open bar, food, and hookah with a $60, $65 price tag and actually purchasing something from the vendors is small to none. So you have to look at that. And then the person started off the event by saying that you shouldn't be so focused on making any money, but more so about the relationships that you're building while you're there. That's a red flag right there, because if you're starting off an event with that type of statement, then you're telling the people that they're not going to make the money in return for what they paid to be vendors at this event, and that the people aren't going to show up. Now, when you're a entrepreneur, a small business owner, you go into these events, yes, it's for exposure, yes, it's to get your name out there, but one of the main reasons you're there is to make some money, because you have a product that you believe in, you have a service that you believe in, and this is an event where people are supposed to be coming to spend money on and support different vendors, especially when it's themed for Black entrepreneurs. And so when you're there, that's what you're expecting. So there shouldn't be some fluff or some sort of, don't worry if you don't make money when you come here, just try to build relationships. But that's not the case. If you're having a vendor event, and shout out to Chosen Ones Clothing, homeboy Ace, he has a clothing brand and he vends in California. And the price to get in there is $10. This is California. We all know the cost of living and everything is high over there. And there's a $10 entry fee. But here it is in South Carolina. There's a $65 entry fee So be careful with your pricing. Does it make sense? Are you actually putting the effort into your product to be charging that amount? Or, because I've noticed this was a thing too that started with the pandemic, are you listening to people who are saying that if your price point is too low, then people are questioning the quality? That's not true. There have been several events that my wife and I have gone to that have been either free or had a really low entry point, $10, $15, something like that, but a very low entry price that had a lot of value, a lot of information in them. And we had a good time. And this was the post that I saw on Facebook, was why are these women empowerment brunches and events have such a high cost point? And then it went down a whole list of different things, because the person who posted it, they had events as well, and at nice spots, nice venues, heavy hors d'oeuvres. I think there was some wine or something like that, and the ticket prices were $35 or less. Because the complaint was, you going to these high priced events and the food quality is terrible, the event spaces don't look that good, the decor doesn't look that good, but you're overcharging people when what you're getting doesn't match the price point. So we have to be real with people to tell them don't charge a whole bunch of money just to pretend that something they have is quality and to show that they see the value in it. We have to look at the overall picture. There's so much you can do to have an event to not overcharge people. But at the end of the day, it looks like, because this was something I saw in the comments as well, a lot of people felt like some of those things were scam like, because you get there and it's some it's some chicken and waffles, some Eggo waffles, and some chicken tenders. Of course, when you have a business and you're doing things, you want to make money. You want to at least, at minimum, get the money back you put into it and make some more, of course. I had Ramon Ray on the episode earlier, and he talked about that. We're doing certain things, and of course we have to charge for certain services and certain things that we're doing, and that's fine. But at the same time, make sure it's matching what you're giving out. And what's your why when you have a service, when you have a product? What's your why? Does what you're charging match your why? And another thing about pricing that I really can't that's really funny to me is how people like to call people broke because they don't want to spend X amount of dollars on a certain event, because people are easily gaslighted when it comes to being called broke. You have people who are struggling and behind on bills because they're worrying about materialistic things so they can have the appearance of being wealthy or rich when they're actually struggling, because it's like looking like you have money seems way more important than actually having money, which is the craziest thing to me, because you're out here putting yourself in a financial bind just to impress people who care nothing about you, who you don't mean anything to them, but as long as you can show off and show like you have it, it's important. But it's not. At the end of the day, that stuff is not important, and I wish people would stop letting others trick them into calling them broke because they see the value in their money, and what you're offering doesn't match the value of my money. So don't fall for that trick of thinking because something has a high price point that it makes sense. So when we're looking at these things, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to pricing, and those are just two things in general that I have been thinking about, let's look at the why with these things, like supporting people's vision. Does it actually align with your own vision? Are you neglecting your vision when it comes to pricing? Are you charging too much for your service or product? Does it really match your demographic? Does it match your target audience? And take an honest look at that, matching your demographic and target audience. Don't let people hype you into overpricing things to show value. You really have to look at it. Just to be honest, look at your industry, look at where you live, look at what you're doing. And of course, like I said earlier, there are going to be some times where there's some price increases, but don't have the price increases so crazy to where, especially like if you're spotlighted and you're getting recognition, and don't make that a reason to up your price. Like, make it make sense to where your customer feels valued. Are you giving that VIP experience to your customers, or are you overcharging them for an experience that's subpar, or are they even getting an experience? So those are just some thoughts I had, or some thoughts I want to share with you all. I hope that you enjoyed the season so far. If you're listening to this on Spotify, I'll have a question in there, so make sure you answer the question. Thank you all for everybody who's purchased my book so far. Thank you for everybody who will purchase the book in the future. I'm probably going to do some episodes pertaining to the book, read a couple of poems, probably do a discussion. So stay tuned for that. But thank you for your time, and everybody remember, keep pushing forward. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Brown Sugar Cafe podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Terrence P. Elmore, and this is the place where poetry meets conversation. Hit that follow button and turn on your notifications so you won't miss an episode. Check out my blog, thebrownsugarcafe.blog. Also connect with me on Instagram at thebrownsugarcafe. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, remember, keep pushing forward.